So thank you so much everyone for joining us today for this week's Friday Focus. If you haven't been to a Friday Focus talk before, they are run by the Hunterian, which is the Museum and Art Gallery of the University of Glasgow here in Scotland. We have a different talk every Friday at 1 p.m. They're always online over Zoom, and each week we have a different speaker with a different area of expertise, and most of the time they're either kind of looking into our exhibitions, or the speakers are looking into our collections and maybe works by specific artists, or maybe specific items from our museum collection as well. So we're delighted that you're all able to join us today, and we're also delighted that all the way from Philadelphia, we are joined by artist Holly Trostle Brigham. Holly is an artist and painter based in Philadelphia, as I've said there, who creates life-size figures in watercolor that depict historical and mythological women. Holly today specifically is going to be exploring the contributions to art and natural history of 19th century artists Jemima Blackburn and Fidelia Bridges. So we're delighted that you can join us today, Holly, and also thank you for getting up so early to join us as well. Is it a 5 or a 6 hour time difference? 5 hour time difference?
It's 5 hours. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Anne Delow and the Hunterian for inviting me to give this talk. Thank you to Eleni Stavru and Rachel Hughes for their assistance in setting up the talk. I want to thank Rob Fairley as well for sharing the work that he's done on Blackburn. And I want to also give special thanks to Sophie Linford and Amy Myers for their advice and support. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Oh, now I'm trying to advance and I'm not able to.
Sorry, Holly, it might just take a wee minute. Because I think we did do it before, didn't we? And it was fine.
I'm arrowing down.
Do you want to arrow to the side? Maybe the sideways arrow instead.
Okay, I'm trying those as well.
Or could you click directly onto the screen?
Should I do what?
Can you click? Sometimes if you click directly onto the screen, it will move forward.
Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay. Let's see. With my work, I interpret the lives of historic women artists with the goal of bringing their achievements to a wider audience. After seeing Scottish women artists, 250 years of challenging perception, curated by Charlotte Rosetek at the Dovecote Center in 2023, I started to research this current project. It was the Hunterian's painting by Blackburn which really inspired me. My new project is about the Scottish artist Jemima Blackburn and the American Fidelia Bridges, who had similar artistic, scientific, and social concerns. Both were painters and illustrators, and both took up drawing when they were ill as young people. Both artists worked in watercolor, as I do, because it was highly portable, unlike oil painting, and was quicker, which helps with painting outdoors. Both focused on nature and especially birds in their habitats. Both subscribed to the Pre-Raphaelite philosophy of seeking truth to nature. Both exhibited at the Royal Academy in London and at the National Academy of Design in New York City and at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia. Both recognized that birds were being depleted by Victorian women's fashion trends and advocated for bird conservation. There were also a number of differences. They were from different social classes. Bridges never married or had children. Blackburn did. Bridges attended art school, but without the funds that Blackburn had. Bridges needed to support herself and was at a time governess for Mark Twain. She worked for Louis Prang and created very marketable cards and prints in addition to her books and selling paintings. Today, I will be concentrating mainly on Blackburn. Blackburn illustrated 27 books and was very popular in her lifetime. Here are two mid-19th century examples of Blackburn's work. She was born in Edinburgh and would eventually settle in the area of Loch Moidart. She was included in the first exhibition of the Society of Female Artists in 1857 and the exhibition of modern British art in America from 1857 to 58, which traveled to New York, city, the National Academy of Design, Boston to the Boston Atheneum, and to Philadelphia to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. In the middle is the oil painting by Blackburn in the collection of the Hunterian, which has inspired me. It demonstrates her close observation of nature, particularly seagulls in flight and their nesting practices. In 1997, it was under the kitchen encasement of the Gilbert Scott building, and then it was moved to the picture store in 2010 and was conserved in 2023 for the Dovecot show. The illustrated volume on the right is called Birds Drawn from Nature, which pronounces that her illustrations are developed from close observation, not solely from dead specimens or from copying the work of other artists. This approach was central to her philosophy. Bridges was born in Salem, Massachusetts, and was orphaned at age 15. Her father had been a sea captain. Just as we saw in the previous slide of Blackburn's work, Bridges painted these thrushes in oil from direct observation during hikes in Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. She studied with the American Pre-Raphaelite William Trost Richards at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. The thrush is a songbird, and hence Blackburn depicts the one on the left with its beak open. Like Blackburn's seagulls, Bridges' thrushes are depicted with their nest and eggs, thereby following the naturalists' interest in the life cycle, while also celebrating their beauty. The illustration on the right is a wood engraving published in the popular magazine Scribner's Monthly, which reached an audience of about 200,000. In September of this year, I traveled to Scotland to see what I could learn about Blackburn. Here is the house she grew up in Edinburgh. It's the one, if you look at the two tallest ones in the center, it's the one that's closest to us. And the garden across the street. Her father was James Wedderburn, Solicitor General for Scotland. He actually died before she was born. Rob Fairley tells me that her name was actually Jemima, a diminutive of James, but she never liked it and changed it. Jemima, or Jemina, as a small girl, was sick much of the time. And her doctor actually told her to draw. She was in 1827, at the age of 4, she was given Bewick's History of British Birds. She would later say that she hoped others would find her books as important to them as his was to her. As a small child, she actually dissected dead mice with the encouragement of her older brother and took anatomy lessons at the Royal College of Surgeons in Edinburgh. Jemima married the Glasgow University mathematician Hugh Blackburn, and they eventually moved to Rochefin House. They raised a family together, and much of her work was created here in the Highlands, and her bird studies and pets were kept here. They also had an apartment in Glasgow where they lived during the school year. If you look on the upper right-hand corner, we'll see one of Blackburn's beautiful watercolors of the Rochefin Bay. On the left is a photo of Jemima with her birds. The right is an image of one of her preserved birds, a juvenile puffin, that she gifted to the Hunterian in 1896. 5 or 6 bird skins of magpies and other birds were included in the gift. Jemima had pet ravens, one named Beelzebub and one named Asmodeus. Asmodeus once took their priest's Bible and tore it page from page. Beelzebub would sit on her shoulder and peck at people's shoes. He was known to bite cat and dog tails, and he once put her slippers into water. There are many anecdotes about her various pet birds, and they're quite amusing. She would actually take birds from different locations and bring them back to Rochefin. She would take babies out of their nests and draw them and then return them. She put food out at night for the birds, and her typical routine was to take a bird that she wanted to paint or draw and bring it inside and put it into a bird cage so that she could then paint it. Afterwards, she would release the bird. She rescued injured birds and nursed them. She once put a blackbird into one of her bird cages so that she could learn the difference between the song that the thrush and the blackbird make, because first she thought it sounded very similar, but she knew there would be a difference. Robins would fly in and out of Rocheven. They nested in curtains. One made a nest in the footman's hat. One made a nest on top of the bed canopy. She and her family would lay crumbs out for the birds, and they would take butter from the table. It sounds like quite a lively household. Once there was a family of redstarts that was nesting into a hole in a stone wall. So she put a net over top of the hole and caught the male and drew him. And then she did the same and got the female so that she could draw it as well. Then, she would return them to their nests. Sometimes Jemima would go and paint and draw birds from the zoological gardens in London. Jemima's close observation of birds enabled her to make a number of discoveries, the most important perhaps being her drawing and recording evidence of a cuckoo extricating a pipit from its nest. Charles Darwin would include this discovery in his 6th edition of On the Origin of Species. It appears in Jemima's 1872 book, The Pipits. I wanted to give you a little bit of historical context for all of this drawing of birds and painting of birds by our 2 artists. And I read this really interesting article. It was in the Illustrated London News about a young lady. She was actually 17, Emily Vandermeesh, and she was from Toulouse. She traveled to London and put on performances that people would pay and go to see, where she had birds trained in bird cages. She would have them come out of the bird cages and pick playing cards and cards that she had laid out in front of the cages, and they would hold the card and then they would tell the audience what was on the card. So that's pretty amazing. Also in the Victorian period, there was quite a bit of bird symbolism. Birds in cages symbolized the safety of women staying in their domestic spaces. And birds in flight symbolized winged souls ascending to heaven. And thrushes symbolized freedom. Here you see an American ad from the period for bird cages. They were priced at $44 per dozen. They could be wooden or metal and were mostly very elaborate. Field glasses saw many 19th century developments. Ignazio Porro created the prism erecting system in 1854. So before this moment, you would look through the viewfinder and all the birds that you saw would be upside down. So that was an important development. Carl Zeiss and Ernst Abbe took field glasses further in 1893. And with the novelty of portable cameras in 1888, birding became a very popular pastime and conservation a bigger concern. A typical cost of field glasses was 18 pounds in 1912. John Hancock, the father of modern taxidermy, who was also an ornithologist and bird collector, created Struggle with Quarry in 1851 and exhibited it at the Great Exhibition. It shows the struggle between a falcon and a heron, and the heron has an eel in its mouth. You can see on the upper right-hand corner of the slide that there's a similar drama developed in Blackburn's painting of the sparrowhawk. She writes and talks about how this sparrowhawk once attacked and killed one of her pet pigeons, and that it flew into the house and actually reached birds that were in cages. Queen Victoria was an avid collector of taxidermy birds, and it became very popular to collect birds and display them in one's home. A November 1859 newspaper article called A Bird Show talks about the Crystal Palace's display of birds. There were judges, prizes, and then families would stuff prize winners to keep in their parlor. One assumes after they died. 14 types of canaries were on view. Some canaries sold for 12 pounds and 6 pence, 1 pound, 5 guineas. Cages were included in the price. One of the attractions was a talking canary with its speech printed in front of it. Chaffinches were sold for 10 sixpence. A linnet, who sang the huntsman's chorus, was on sale for 50 pounds. Robins flew around and pecked at other robins in cages. A starling talked and asked people to kiss him. He whistled a tune, called the cat, and sold for £3, 3/6. There was a competition for the best group of British birds in one cage or aviary with a prize of £50. A proud thrush was seen rumpling his feathers. There were 6 nightingales, aged 7 months, for £12. The author cautioned not to buy them before feathers were formed, as someone was duped and bought larks instead. Parrots, with their talking repertoire in print, sold for £100. One actually imitated thrushes and performed nursing the baby. This leads us to bird conservation. One of my goals for this project is to draw parallels between the diminishing numbers of birds due to hunting and fashion in Bridges and Blackburn's time, with the dire situation of dwindling bird populations today due to global warming. I will focus on the thrush species as my family name, Trostle, means thrush. It's German. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds was founded in 1889, and in America, the National Audubon Society was founded in 1905. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act was signed into law in 1918 in the United States, nearly simultaneously with the passage of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. In fact, women were driving these changes. The avian motif became so popular that supporters wore bluebird pins for solidarity during state suffrage votes in the US, and in Canada, they used a thrush on their pins as seen here. Jemima wrote and hoped that her books on birds would, quote, lead them, people, to consider the fowls of the air as capable of affording delight in other ways besides filling a game bag or adorning a hat. Let's remember, Blackburn published her Birds Drawn from Nature, 1862, and Birds from Moidart and Elsewhere in 1895. And Bridges was really devoting the majority of her creative output to birds and their natural habitats and bringing them to the foreground of the picture plane. Bridges was a sustaining member of the American Forestry Association, which was founded in 1875. They maintain forests with one of the main goals of boosting the habitat for endangered birds. In the UK, there are 6 species of thrush, and 2 are red listed and 2 are amber listed, which are endangered levels due to global warming. The song thrush has seen a large decline since the 70s and 80s due to lack of food and nesting sites from intensive farming. The RSPB says they are trying to improve these numbers by increasing hedgerows and by using new farming methods. The photograph on the left is the woman is sporting an autobonnet, which was invented to deter women from using hats which had dead birds and feathers and things on them. So the autobonnet, making a pun on Audubon. Blackburn was very well connected and was a good corresponder. Ruskin introduced her to John Everett Millay, and they would write back and forth and visit. Here's an actual letter in the Morgan Library's collection of Blackburn writing to Millay and telling him about what she has been up to. And the letter accompanies her gift of a book of her Bible beasts. She also was good friends with Edward Landseer, the animal painter, who she would visit, and she actually made a watercolor painting of one of their visits. Here we have 2 pages from Jemima's 100-page sketchbook at the National Galleries in Scotland, which I had the good fortune of seeing thanks to Hannah Brocklehurst, curator of prints and drawings. She has actually invited me to give a talk in person in the spring of 2025 about this particular project. Here we see watercolors showing the dangers of hunting dogs in close proximity to pet birds. I wanted to show you some of the books that Jemima Blackburn illustrated. On the left, we see the cover of her instructive picture book from 1859 with seabirds flying and all together. I think it's a beautiful image. I love how the water curls up at the bottom. And on the right is a page from a book she illustrated Sir Thomas Thumb, and the young boy is in the air, sort of tangled in bats' wings. here are two of her illustrations from the scripture by an animal painter with notes by a naturalist. So this is the book that she actually, pages from the book that she gifted to John Everett Millay. So we have the dove from Noah's Ark and a raven in the background, so probably one of her pets. And on the right, we see swallows nesting, and then birds in the distance also with their nest and eggs. Here we have the cover of one of Fidelia Bridges' books that she collaborated with Susie Barstow Skelding. It's called Familiar Birds and What the Poets Sing of Them. And on the right is the page she illustrated on the thrush. In September 2024, I visited Jemima's stained glass window of the Nativity at the Glasgow Cathedral. I was struck at how beautiful it is and how much it reminded me of Pre-Raphaelite stained glass windows. There was no signage. There was no postcard demonstrating that it was a stained glass window by a woman artist or by Jemima Blackburn. And I would love to eventually see that changed. The next window, the giraffe window, was just this week brought to my attention by Rob Fairley, and it has just been rediscovered in the last week or two. It was in the Castle Weems and then ended up in someone's garage and was rediscovered. The tall giraffe is actually from the previous book cover that we saw, the illustrated book. And I think it's just quite lovely. I have up here a quote from a letter that John Ruskin wrote to Jemima. I'll just read it. Dear Miss Wedderburn, this is obviously a segment of it. Your taste is morbid and must be changed. When my wife was a little girl and took to eating slate pencil, her governess whipped her until she left off, and you ought to be whipped till you give up painting railroads. So what we think has happened here is Jemima Blackburn had two paintings accepted into Royal Academy shows. In 1848, the painting was Phaeton, and in 1849, it was called, the painting was Plow Horses Startled by a Railway Engine. So we are assuming that she asked Ruskin for his opinion of her painting. He responded by writing her a very, very long letter, which extended over several days. And he actually, in the letter, tells her that she paints like a monkey. He has the quote that's on the screen was also included in the letter. She asks her if ladies are allowed to go to the National Gallery to copy, and recommends that she do this if she can. So so we're not really sure how she responded to this criticism. The painting has not been located, though Rob Fairley has drawings of it. So is it possible that she destroyed it or painted over it? There were many challenges to women artists at this time. There was real difficulty over where they could learn and exhibit. In 1868, two founding members of the Royal Academy were Angelica Kaufman and Mary Moser, but they were excluded from life classes, meetings, and votes. In 1860, Laura Herford was accepted into the Royal Academy, but by accident, because she had used her initials, LH. So then we start to think about the fact that Bridges and Blackburn signed their names, FB and JB. So I think that was done on purpose. In the 1890s, women were allowed in life classes, and finally, female academicians were allowed in 1936. There was the Royal Female School of Art founded in 1842, which I need to do some more research on. And PAFA, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia, in 1868 allowed ladies to attend life class, but they were only able to draw and paint from female nudes. Despite all these challenges, Blackburn persisted. She participated in the 1858 British Art Show at the National Academy of Design, the Boston Athenaeum, and PAFA. She seemed to have taught herself many things, asked advice from known artists, maybe had lessons with them, and had anatomy lessons. She worked hard and drew her watercolor sketches almost every day. Her work is in the Hunterian, the National Gallery, Scotland. British Museum, British Library, the National Portrait Gallery, the James Clerk Maxwell Foundation, among others. Bridges was the only woman in the early years of the American Watercolor Society and got elected to the National Academy of Design as an associate in 1873. In 1876, she exhibited at the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition, the Palace of Fine Arts, and in 1893 at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Her artwork hung in most American homes, and she continued to sell her work to collectors. Her work is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Florence Griswold Museum, the Wadsworth Atheneum, the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, among others. Wouldn't it be lovely now if we could somehow get Blackburn's work in American collections and Bridges' work in British collections? So my work as an artist, obviously I've been doing art history and studying and sort of researching these two artists, and now I turn to actually producing artwork inspired by them. You see Blackburn's Fieldfare painting on the left, and then my copies of some of Jemima Blackburn's paintings on the right. I've also gone to the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia and painted some of the thrush specimens, and you can see Blackburn's painting of the Mistral thrush on the right. Here are my thumbnail sketches that will lead to very large landscape paintings that will be 60 by 40 inches or 40 by 60, depending upon how I ultimately orient the paintings. They will be watercolor and they may have some ink. But my intention is to, the one on the left is for Blackburn and the one on the right is for Bridges. But my intention is to create these very large, beautiful black and white landscapes showing the woman artist in each landscape at work. So if you're aware of 19th century landscape paintings, Hudson River School, for instance, you'll oftentimes see a male artist working in his environment, and I want to write the situation and show women working. This is one of my first of 6 artist books that I will be creating for this exhibition. This book I completed this summer. It is started out as a found album from the Victorian period, and with this faux graining, which I thought was fabulous, and for the most part, it was in terrific shape. I then created 100 drawings and watercolors and inserted them into the book. I went to the locales where Fidelia Bridges lived and worked in Connecticut and created these landscapes. I have a few takeaway points for you, and just give you a few minutes to take a look at those. And thank you so much for joining me today and listening and finding out about my new project.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Holly. That was wonderful. So brilliant to hear you speak, and also just so brilliant to see so many like beautiful images from 3 artists, you know, yourself, Jemima. Yeah, that was just fab. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, you're very welcome to pop them in the chat box, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Or if you'd rather, you're very welcome to actually just take yourself off mute, or you can turn your camera on. It's entirely up to yourself. I was wondering, Holly, when obviously I understand that you visited the Hunterian, and that was September of this year, was it?
Yes.
And I was wondering how, if there was any archives or any information about how Jemima Blackburn came to donate her artwork and the specimens to the Hunterian, like if there was any sort of established connection between her and the organisation already, or was it simply because she had a property in Glasgow, or?
Well, yeah, because her husband was a professor of mathematics at the university, and so I think it was a natural choice for her. I haven't actually had the opportunity. I've seen the painting in person, and Angelo was kind enough to meet me and show me the painting and the bird specimens. But I suppose on my trip in the spring, I should have the hopefully have the opportunity to look at the archival files on the objects to see how and if there were certain circumstances to their donation.
Because it would be really interesting to see the correspondence between who was the curator at that point, and between Jemima Blackburn. That would just be quite that would be quite interesting to see.
It would be really wonderful.
Yeah, that would be fab.
Can I jump in? Sorry. Hi, Rachel. This is Anne speaking. I met Holly in September when Holly came to have a look at the Jemima Blackburn and the specimen. I just thought I would jump in just to say there were no curators at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, curators really started to be a thing at the Hunterian anyway, in the 20th century. So, I mean, there may have been someone who dealt with the zoology collection, but I suspect that there were kind of honorary curators as professors and people who worked for the university who would also be given the collections to look after. I was just going to check quickly whilst we were still online. I don't think we really know exactly why the painting was given. I think we had a chat about that already, didn't we?
Yeah.
And the work is that basically it needs to be, there may be something in the archives of the university, but we haven't found it yet, have we? So yeah, that was the thing. I really enjoyed your talk, Holly. Thank you very much. And I was very interested in that stained glass window from Wim's Castle.
Yes.
And if you want, I can put you in touch with the owner of Wim's Castle.
Oh, well, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Don't know whether they would be able to tell you a bit more about what Jemima Blackburn did for them and whether they commissioned her to do other works. Or, because I suspect that with the social circles that she moved in, she probably would have known them personally.
Right, that's my guess too. And well, she actually was on the trip that she took to Iceland. One of the passengers was the contemporary owner of the castle. So that was kind of how she got to know him. But I think my guess is if there's one stained glass window, there must have been more. And that's the thing with a lot of these historical women artists, that there's oftentimes work that has not, that they did that hasn't been attributed yet, hasn't been found. Maybe it's been attributed to male artists. So yeah, so it is. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think it's fun, but it's also why would she have done just one stained glass window? There were probably more.
Yeah, you've already got 2 or 3, haven't you? So that you're aware of, and because there's a Glasgow Cathedral, and there is one at the little chapel close to her estate.
Yes, there are actually 2. Yes, there are 2 there. Thank you, Farima. I meant to mention that there are 2 up in the Moydart area in a little church. Yes.
I think you're right. There must be more because, yeah, just would be too much of a coincidence.
Right.
No, thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. Always exciting to see as well. There is always more research that can be done, isn't there? There's always kind of more to learn and, more possibilities to find out. We've got a question here. Let me just check in this chat. We've got a question here for you, Holly, from Joseph. I believe Jemima's husband was a keen amateur photographer. Is there any evidence that she used photographs as an aid to her painting?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the book, I didn't mention it, but I was hoping that you would have read it on the label under the image. The book that she did for the scenes from the Bible, where she's putting the birds into specific biblical scenes, those were actually album and prints. So we believe that she may have done the illustrations, and then Hugh Blackburn, her husband, photographed them, and they decided to put the book out into the world as these photographs of her illustrations, which is quite interesting. She has a number of, that I've seen, a number of her watercolor sketches and drawings of showing Hugh playing around with, camera, the upright camera. But as far as I know, I haven't seen, and there may be, I haven't seen, her doing an exact copy of images that she's taken with the camera. But I think she was, he was playing around with it, but I'm sure she was as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Josie, for your question, and thanks, Holly. We've got a question here from Megan. Holly, can you tell us a bit more about how this project resonates with other work you've done with women artists from this period? Have there been any surprises appear during your research for this project?
Well, thank you, Megan. Well, I had some of you who know my work. I had an solo exhibition at the Delaware Art Museum in 2022, and that exhibition was based on the Pre-Raphaelite artist and poet Elizabeth Siddall. And so, obviously here I am dealing with two other women artists who started out with the Pre-Raphaelite movement. I think Blackburn and Bridges, their styles both matured and they developed their own style, but they both had that very deep rooting in the Pre-Raphaelite style of painting and drawing and looking at nature. So in a way, I'm still kind of staying in that time period. But I think it's interesting to try to think about, these two women artists who had, they were cared about birds. They were focusing on birds in their work, working at the same time period, following the same original training and method of the Pre-Raphaelite genre. But I have no evidence that they knew of one another or had ever met. It would be really amazing if I could somehow link the two of them. But I would say that, the fact that they had some success during their time period and then have now sort of a lot of people maybe don't know of them. That's similar to Elizabeth Siddall. So it's my goal to try to make them better known.
Thanks, Megan, for your question. Thank you, Holly. I don't think we have any more questions there, so we might wrap up. Just to confirm then, Holly, so your next project in Scotland, or next part of the project, is a talk in Edinburgh, and that's not too far away, really? 6?
Yes, I think we're aiming for April. The date hasn't been set, but and it will be at the National Gallery Scotland, and I will be coming. At that time, I will also be going up to the Western Highlands and traveling around to the places where Jemima Blackburn lived and worked, doing something similar that I did for Fidelia Bridges, so that I can do some sketches and watercolors and then start to develop the larger landscape painting and to create the artist book. So I said there would be 6 artist books. There will be 3 for each of the artists. The first one that I did for Bridges, there will be something similar for Blackburn. I'm also almost done with the second book for Fidelia Bridges, which is an herbarium. And so that's taking flowers and pressing them and creating a book around them. So also in the locales where Bridges worked, I want to do the same for Blackburn. And then the third book will be, for each of the artists, will be focused more on birds and eggs.
So a lot of plans in the works then, a lot of work to be doing. And that sounds like an amazing trip, Holly. That does sound wonderful. And just to confirm, the talk then next April, it's not, maybe the details aren't all completely firmed up yet, but is that going to be open to the general public?
I'm not sure, and I don't know if Hannah Brocklehurst is on this this talk at the moment, but it may be or it may not be. I'm not certain. But I guess stay tuned. So I would say, go to the National Gallery Scotland in the spring, and
Mhm.
hopefully there will be some sort of notification on it.
Okay, that's fab. Thank you so much, Holly. Well, we'll be back in touch with you then to kind of get an update on that, like in the new year, because that would be wonderful to see you in person as well.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Holly, for sharing your time with us today and sharing your expertise. Thank you to our audience for joining us. I do just want to make you all aware of next week's Friday Focus Talk. Same time, same place. Sorry, the talk here is with Dr. Martin McGregor, who is going to be talking about the recreated, wait, I'll say this right, who's recreated a 3D head of Robert the Bruce from items from the Hunterian collection. So that's going to be the talk next week with Dr. Martin McGregor, who's a senior lecturer in history at the University of Glasgow. He'll be telling us about that project. So I very much hope you can join us again next week. Again, thank you everyone. Have a lovely weekend when it comes. Holly, it's probably time for your breakfast because it's only quarter to 8 in the morning. So thank you very much, everyone, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.